April 15th meeting of the Land Use and Servicing Committee of the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board. Just a couple of brief notes here before we get started. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. You should hear a note when the recording starts. And Shelley or Jamie or Lisa, I'm not sure who's running.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you very much. That is our note that this conference is now being recorded. That we will use the recording as a backup should for some reason our live stream on YouTube fail today. Can I ask having called the meeting to order now, please ask for a motion to adopt the, sorry, I'll just make a couple more brief remarks here before we get started. A couple of things just process-wise, in the interest of ensuring everyone's sticks to their own schedules. I know everyone's very busy in this group. We will end promptly at 4 p.m. Should we find at that time the agenda is not completed, I will ask for unanimous consent to continue on to complete the agenda. Should we not receive unanimous consent to complete the agenda, we will add the outstanding agenda items to a future meeting for further discussion, or perhaps for discussion at the board should we decide that is appropriate. You'll note today that Jamie Graves, Lisa Tipman, and JP Leclerc will be representing the CMRB. Jordan is unable to join us today for today's discussion. Confident though that we've got some the folks that we need on the call. Should there be any questions or that require Jordan's input, I will take those directly back to him and get back to the group promptly. So with that, I will ask for a motion, please, for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Peter.
All right, we have Mayor Peter Brown from Airdrie. We've got Mayor Janung seconding. Any discussion on the adoption of the agenda? Seeing none, by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to the motion to adopt the agenda? Seeing none, hearing none, we have adopted the agenda. Same question for the minutes. Can I ask please for a motion to adopt the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 1st of April?
Calgary will move that, seeing no issues or omissions by our reading.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giancarlo Corra makes that motion. Do we have a seconder?
Stokes to second.
Mayor Bill Robinson seconds. Any discussion on the adoption of the minutes? Seeing none, by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to the adoption of the minutes? Seeing none, hearing none, we are on to item number 4, public engagement. Ann Harding is here with us and will take us through the summary of our recently completed public engagement process. Hello, Ann. We'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Thanks so much. So I have a fair bit of information to review in the package, as well as some verbal comments to share just about some of the qualitative information that was seen, and look forward to questions and comments and conversation on that following as well. If we can go to the slides. Perfect. First one. So a reminder of the goal of this phase. So each public engagement phase had different goals. This one was previously unplanned, and so the goal was very much for board members to inform the public about what was being proposed in the draft plan, and offer the opportunity for the public to give their feedback on that draft plan. And so it was very targeted, whereas our previous engagements have been more broad, looking at what's important to people and what's valued in our communities, because that was used to make decisions about what would go into the plan. We now have a draft plan, and so this was gauging that feedback. Again, still in COVID times, we're fully virtual in our engagement, fully online. Having the online engagement website that's been active, really it's been online since last July, but used in the similar tools. And we also had 3 open houses this time, 3 virtual open houses. That was successful in our second round in November. And so we wanted to use that opportunity for people to ask specific questions to them as well. And we also asked municipalities to really dig in, I guess, on promoting We knew we wanted to build awareness to make sure people knew that this opportunity was there for them to learn more about the plan and to provide feedback on it based on their own interests and experiences. And so that was the request that we made, was to really push that participation through different municipal channels. So we'll go to the participation that we had. So over 4,000 visits to the site from 2,800 different people, I'd say. And so that's sort of the way to read that. We had 867 who actually filled out a quick poll or a discussion forum or a survey. And so people in that 867, those are unique people, but they might have filled out multiple tools. And in terms of just the other stats for who attended, the open houses, it's interesting just to note that the first two open houses were around lunchtime. They had much higher attendance than our evening open house. So I guess if any of you are considering future public engagements, this might give you some indication. Not sure if that's why, but we definitely had stronger attendance there. And we did have a few people, I'd say, just from my gut read, maybe 10 or so who attended all three open houses. We'll move to the next slide. So this is where I'd like to spend just a bit of time saying what's different in this engagement process from the previous phases. So when we first launched our engagement plan early on, one of our indicators of sort of valid engagement or meaningful public engagement for this project would be to receive responses with a geographic distribution that was reflective of the region. And so this is what we've been looking at to say, hey, are we hearing from the region as we view it with that participant distribution? And as you can see, phase 3 is wildly different from phases 1 and 2 in terms of where input was coming from and how that relates to the geographic distribution of the region. So happy to open into conversation after the presentation about what that means and sort of why that might have been. But just I want to be very clear that this third round of engagement was very different from the first two rounds. Go to the next slide. So preliminary survey results. So there's a lot of data tables to pull. And so in terms of what to include here, there will be a full What We Heard report that includes a lot of variations on the data that you will all get to see. For the purposes of this presentation, just want to be clear that these are the aggregate survey results. And so there's about 20% of the responses that were from duplicate IP addresses. As we addressed this at our last meeting, this is a perfectly reasonable thing for people who have multiple people using the same computer, or people who don't have internet, people filling it out for people who don't have internet who are in their community. So that's a valid reason for why there would be multiple IP responses. And they also exist, and you might have had somebody filling it out just a whole bunch of times. So we can pull that out, and you can look at that data and decide sort of how you layer in and interpret that, or what it might mean. But for the purposes of these results here, these are the aggregates. So we'll move to the next slide. So the next number of slides that you have in your package, and I think we'll have them on the screen, but I just want to share that there's a high 65%. We have 4 main questions that we're asking. I guess I'll just preface that. There were 4 questions in the survey where we outlined, here's the benefits that we're trying to achieve through regional growth planning, and in the draft plan make certain choices in order to achieve those benefits. And so that's how we framed these questions. And then we landed on how comfortable are you making these 4 different choices if it results in those benefits. And so the first was about preferred growth areas. And so these were the results from that. The second one was about the 3 preferred place types that are included in the plan. So that, again, is different. And so, again, those results. And again, I'll frame up that we used a scale of degrees of comfort, really not wanting to force a for or against, but allowing people to say, like, I have mixed feelings about it, or, I don't like it, but I understand why you did it. and so to offer those options as well. Then we'll move to the next. In terms of, we knew that specifically our rural municipalities had a strong interest and provided strong input into what was shared on the engagement website, wanting to be clear that there were specific choices being made related to rural development and wanting to get feedback on those. So a question about focusing into Hamlet growth areas was one of the questions that we incorporated as a result of that feedback. And then we'll go to the fourth, is around joint planning areas and the feedback on that. So as you can see, a strong sort of over half not at all okay with it response, and we can talk more about that if you wish. So you can carry on. So because there was geographically disproportionate participation in the third phase, with Foothills having a significant number, as well as other municipalities having, Rocky View having, more input than would be reflective of the geographic distribution of population, and Calgary having way less than would be reflective of the geographic distribution. I thought it would be prudent to break down results by municipality as well. There are also, Chestermere and Airdrie had very low participation, less than 30, less than 20, I think, people responding. And so while these results breaking down by municipality, I would not recommend you taking as, oh, this is what my citizens think. I did feel it was prudent to break this down so that you get a sense of where the results are coming from with those different regional views. So this will be done, it's okay, you can stay on this slide. In the What We Heard report, this will be done for each of the 4 questions. I've just done it in this presentation for the first question for those to get a sense of it. So as you can see in the bottom left corner here, or bottom right, sorry. So this one is for Airdrie, and so walking through each municipality. So we had 23 responses from Airdrie, and this is the breakdown. Into the next slide. So Calgary. The next slide, Chestermere. Next slide, Cochrane. Next one, Foothills. Next slide, High River. Next slide, Okotoks. Next, Rocky View. And next, Strathmore. So this would be entirely the same answer, and then Wheatland from those participants. I also wanted to share as well, so we can, I don't know if I have a Q&A or discussion slide next on this, just to the timeline of engagement, so how we got to where we were. So this was a quick process, but I think a fair representation of where we were at in the planning process and the information that people received. And again, we wrapped it up on April 8th so that we were able to share these results today. So you now are able to know what was shared in the public engagement and use that as you continue to finalize the growth plan. And the week of May 3rd is when we will make sure that you have that full What We Heard report. That also includes all of those verbatim and discussion comments. I did want to take a chance just to, we had the one open-ended question in the survey that was, what else would you like the CMRB to know, the board to know as they work toward the final plan? We have 21 themes, so I'm not going to read all of those. We made something a theme if it had more than 15 comments. And that's sort of just our arbitrary threshold to say, yes, this is something that many people think. They fall into 3 main categories around governance of the board. So we had a lot of, I'm going to say exactly the same words that were shared as individual comments related to dislike of the governance of the CMRB. So again, happy to comment on what that might tell us, but there's comments very much related to the governance of the CMRB. There's some comments related, of course, to the plan itself, so I'll share some of those. The top one, the plan is unfair to rurals and has a strong urban bias. The plan might impede growth in rural regions. Both equal comments of supportive of the plan and not supportive of the plan. Concern that the plan will cause a tax increase or be costly. Desire to stop urban sprawl. Desire for growth to happen organically or be market driven. And plan needs to include increased protection of agricultural land and uses. So those were the plan related comments. There was a bit around the public engagement process as well, as I mentioned, as the governance. So that, I believe, is my quick run through of the public engagement update, and happy to entertain questions or discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Anne, for that. Appreciate your work. I'll open that up now to committee members. Any questions or comments you'd like to make at this time? Mayor Brown, Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I can't seem to find. Oh, there it is. I think I found the chat. I've been on 2 different systems this morning. So, first thing, thanks, Anne. I've always been wondered how this was all going to come together. So, I got a couple of questions. So, when we get a survey for the city of Airdrie, it's always plus or minus 3%. If we talk to 500 people, that's kind of what they tell us. So, based on how many respondents are here, what kind of weight are you going to be putting into the revised plan based on this commentary? Or I don't know if you can even answer that question. Maybe somebody from Calthorpe can, but I'd really like to understand that piece. The other one, I guess further to, we're curious on the 153 exact duplicate responses. Was there any investigation on the IP addresses? Did they come from the same place, or is that of any concern to you? And the last question is around some of the responses. Sorry, my computer locked up here. There it is. So we're seeing that preferred growth areas, development of the 3 preferred place types, and what's the other one here? Rural development and Hamlet growth areas. So over 60% across the board of respondents total were not in support or didn't like that at all. So again, I guess it goes back to the original question of what kind of weight are you going to be giving the respondents when it probably isn't recognizing it's well under 1% of our overall population. So I'm curious on that level. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Anne.
On mute there, Anne.
I've only done it twice in 2021. So thanks for the questions. I'll answer the one about the duplicates first. There's only one that is a response from, I think it was 8. So that was the exact same IP address, was a person who responded 8. And so I think we've heard from members of the board in the past that, they know somebody filled it out for their husband and their neighbor and their, a couple other people in their community that didn't have access to a computer. So that could be where that came from. The rest are duplicates in the sense that they're like 2 or 3 responses from the same IP address. So it's not like there's 100 responses from the same IP address. So happy to, it's not a major concern to me. I think it's useful to split up the data because that is something that we can recognize and just sort of see if there are differences associated with that. In terms of weighting and sort of the, I guess, weight or stock that you put in the results, so as Calthorpe, as the chair of Calthorpe, we were not, the comments, sorry, I'm going to pause and say this engagement process was requested by the board. And it was not proposed as part of HDR Calthorpe's engagement process into the plan. We have gone through public engagement to reflect in the plan. And so we have what we've heard that's been reflected in the draft plan that's here, this process was established by the board to understand what community members thought. It was disappointing to me that there was a media campaign that gave messages to members of the public to respond to in this process. And we saw that come out in the open-ended responses part of the survey, where the exact, as I mentioned, the exact same words were used. And it worries me that that means that people weren't actually taking the time to understand the plan and what it meant to them, or to ask questions about the plan and what it meant to them, but that they were responding to what they had been asked to do. And so from my perspective, that skews the results, because we know that people were using words that were not their own.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that. We've got Reeve Ohl up next on the speaking list. Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing the results with us today. I'll just do a sound check. Are you able to hear me? Thank you.
We got you. You bet. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess just based on your last comment, I'm a bit concerned that you're assuming that all the responses from the rural area were people who didn't understand the impact of the plan. So I'm very concerned that that would be now your basis, and perhaps leading you not to take this into consideration as an actual fair representation from people who saw the plan for the very first time. This, as you mentioned, is a different process, in that we were able to actually see the plan, and that those who responded were greatly impacted and therefore felt the need to respond. So I believe that from residents that we've engaged with and had conversations with, that they did understand some of the results of what this meant to them, and they believe that their response should be considered as meaningful. Perhaps the engagement being online, they didn't feel like writing an extensive essay, and maybe they might be sharing that more with their elected representatives. So, there's different forms of communication. This one perhaps was more brief, but I would suggest there may be another answer, rather than it just being a disappointment that there was some skewing of people who had intended to get their results shared. And from the amount of people that responded to me personally, I would say there are all individuals that took the time and that they weren't trying to load up numerous answers. So I think there was a response based on, first of all, of course, that the plan itself was revealed, and that was so important, and also that people really cared about what was happening in their community. So I really wanted to just make that clear. And our question today for you is with regards to the next steps here, and that is in your timeline you shared that in the week of May the 3rd, that you'll be sharing finalized and approved what we heard report. And we were just wondering if that will then be able to get to the board for the next board meeting on May the 6th. And then after that time, would it then be public information?
Thank you very much. Yes. So the what we heard report would be finalized that week. The intent is to get it so that it can be approved by the board as soon as possible. And I apologize if that timing doesn't align directly with the dates. I think it would be, my assumption is that the May board meeting would be when it is approved and able to be made public, but that a draft report would be shared at the committee meeting prior, as has been our practice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Schedule-wise, we don't have another land use servicing committee meeting until June, so obviously that's not going to line up. But we do have a pretty significant cadence of board meetings weekly, starting the 6th of May and then 14, 21, 28. So, we obviously would like and expect to have that package out a week fully in advance. So not asking you to commit to that necessarily, but we'll perhaps work together with the admin team here at CMRB to make sure that we have done a thorough job, obviously, of the what we heard report, but also that is prepared a week or more in advance of a board meeting to give all members a chance to review it.
So that's April 29th, right?
No, we have next board meeting is a week tomorrow, the 23rd of April, and then Friday, May 6th. And then from there, May 14th, 21, 28, et cetera.
Yeah, so I'll aim so that it can be reviewed for the May 6th meeting.
Great. Okay, that's very good. Yes, that sounds good. Okay, so with that, thank you for that, Anne. Dan Hen, Reeve Hen, we've got you next. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. So my comments are directed more to the board than to Anne. I do appreciate your comments, and although I do have to say when we talked about the previous surveys in 1 and 2, when people supported the ideas on those ones, the responses, I didn't get this validation of responses that I'm seeing today. But anyways, I appreciate the information. But to the board, I mean, I'd really hope that the board takes into consideration and puts some weight on what we're seeing from this survey. Let's use the 80-20 rule if perhaps what Anne is alluding to with a few of the responses in I guess Calthorpe's opinion maybe being similar or the same, or people being told what to write. Let's take 20% of that out and look at the remainder of the responses. And I think it clearly shows that a good majority of the population that responded, or the people that responded to this survey, are clearly not happy with what they're seeing. So again, I really hope the board considers what you're seeing in this survey, and we take it serious. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Mayor Janung, you're up next. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for how you've conducted yourself, very professional. Really enjoyed your reports and all of the work that you have done for us as a board. Way above and beyond, and very professional. So thank you for that. I also want to share, I agree. I'm disappointed that I feel our engagement process has been, and I'm just going to say, tampered with, but we get what we get now. And with that, I would just like to put a motion on the floor to accept this information, Mr. Chair, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion on the floor, Mayor Janung, to receive for information. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sobel, seconds. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion to receive for information the public consultation public engagement draft growth plan? Okay, hearing none, the motion is the committee receive for information an update on phase 3 of the public engagement for the draft growth plan. By exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion? See none, hear none, that motion carries. And Anne, with our thanks, we will excuse you unless you'd like to stick around for the rest of the meeting. You're certainly welcome, but appreciate your candor, professionalism, and diligence on this important work. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, on to the draft servicing plan. We'll turn this over to, I believe Jamie's going to take this one.
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Providing an update, we're just going to kind of carry on from where we left off on April 1st, our last Land Use and Servicing Committee meeting. At that time, I had provided an update on the preliminary draft and how we had got there. And basically, it was through a number of meetings with TAG and HDR team to get a first draft of the content of the servicing plan. And since then, a couple more check-ins with TAG have happened and resulted in a revision or update to that draft. that is before you. And so just to set the stage a little bit and kind of remind everyone where we're coming from, to develop that system of expectations for addressing collaborative regional servicing matters going forward, the pattern of growth in the CMR needs to be known. And so without it, it's difficult to focus efforts and investment in ways that meet the objectives set out by the government of Alberta in the CMRB regulation. And the objectives include things like finding opportunities for optimization and efficiency for servicing and prioritizing the ratepayer for new growth in the CMR. And that logical first iteration of the servicing plan should really develop a strong foundation among the member municipalities and a collaborative process on which to build lasting relationships regarding collaborative regional servicing in the Calgary Metro region. And so through the agenda, we just noted that the board values do reflect some of this notion and carry on with the direction given by the province of Alberta. And in fact, it does embody a number of the things that we are hearing from also some of the development community and our stakeholders within the region that are interested in the regional work that we are embarking upon. Also noting the objectives around identifying the services that need to support the growth plan. So this is very, as we've always discussed, the growth plan and the servicing plan are very integrated, and we tried to reflect that with the servicing plan that's before you today. It should also support the optimization of shared services and enhancing that ratepayer dollar, taking that dollar and making it go further, and facilitating orderly, economical, and environmentally responsible growth in the region. So last time we discussed and did a check-in on those 3 pillars that you see within the servicing plan. And you'll recall that they are the servicing priorities. So what are the areas of focus for the future work of the board and the municipalities as it relates to how the implementation of the growth plan happens. And a key tool that was identified is those working groups, to have those experts and knowledgeable persons in the context of both municipal but also the regional work that's ongoing, and potentially using external stakeholders when it's appropriate. Those working groups would be made up of experts, as I was saying, and we see them as key conduits to supporting the board's decision making. Finally, one of the last pillar is evidence-based decision making, and it really includes defining problems, collecting information, and whatnot to make sure that those decisions that the board makes have taken the time to share all the required information, done the appropriate monitoring, and develop strategies for solving the most pressing challenges and opportunities within the region. So with that, I want to move on to those fundamental assumptions, and they get the feedback of the committee on the fact that some of these are written into the servicing plan as it is. Right now, based on the feedback that we're receiving from TAG, generally speaking, there is support of these ideas, but I really want to be here to get that feedback from the committee to make sure that we're on the right track. So around preferred growth areas and their relationship to servicing, the context studies are a clear way for those municipalities to develop strategies regarding some of the servicing requirements within one of the 3 preferred growth areas of the growth plan, but the growth is expected in all municipalities, not just those participating in a joint planning area, and not just within the joint planning area. They are within also the members' boundaries. So preferred growth areas also include urban municipalities and also those hamlet growth areas that are identified. So to kick off the conversation, the first question being A, does the committee agree that the preferred growth areas identified in the draft plan should also be the priority servicing locations that are the work of the board going forward? So with that, Mr. Chair, I might pause to get some feedback if that works for you.
It certainly does, yeah. So the question is up there before you on the screen. Does the committee agree that preferred growth areas identified in the draft growth plan are also priority servicing locations? Anyone care to venture a comment on this, offer an opinion, or ask a question of Jamie on this? This is maybe why we have morning meetings instead of afternoon, right after lunch. But we have a couple of folks on the list. Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And again, for the previous conversation we had, we think you did a great job of capturing those in the minutes. So thanks to anyone who was involved in those minutes. It was very comprehensive. On this question in particular, we just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things that we noted when we reviewed everything. We just wanted to share that the disadvantages to the rural municipalities is a result of this look at things, because according to the definition of preferred growth area, all the lands within the urban areas are preferred growth areas, while in the rural municipalities, they're only the JPAs and the Hamlet growth areas, which we don't have any of those. So this also means that existing communities, then we'll give you the example here in our rural municipalities, it's the hamlets, but also within the county, we have the town of Black Diamond, the town of Turner Valley, the village of Longview, and others that are in our other rural municipalities in Rocky, for example. They're moved down on the list due to the way that we're reading this. So we note that the definition of urban municipality does not include non-member urban municipalities, and we're just wondering if you realize that this is the way that this can be interpreted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebel. Jamie, you want to respond to that?
Yeah. So I think the direction that we received from the province is to really work together on those areas where regional collaboration can provide a lot of benefit. And I think, there are opportunities going forward. There are in the servicing plan also opportunity to identify other areas where there may be a need for services. But at this time, and given the fact that we've heard a lot of commentary around the municipalities needing to be disciplined in the way they spend their resources, including people hours and the time that has been taken to produce the regional growth plan, we really wanted to reflect that in doing in prioritizing where the municipalities can get the biggest benefit. And so that is sort of the rationale behind reflecting that. But also, Foothills County does have a number of Hamlet growth areas that are identified in the growth plan, and those would be supported in the servicing plan as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that was captured. And although those are not known at this time, those locations, they are understood to be part of the growth that will happen in the future in Foothills County.
Okay. Thanks for that, Jamie. Does that answer your question, Suzanne?
Thank you. It draws attention to the issue, and hopefully ongoing we can have the opportunity to clarify, because of things not being in existence and we're writing about stuff that's in the future. It's just something we wanted to highlight that can be a concern, and also note that we have other communities that we want to bring a voice to. So thank you for the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Reeve Henn, Dan, you're up next.
Thanks, through the chair. So we feel, while servicing should be focused on the preferred growth areas, we should also be giving priority to approved and existing ASPs that our prospective municipalities have. These areas have approved statutory plans and will obviously develop in the future. So that's what I have here.
Okay, thanks. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Reeve Henn. This was discussed at TAG most recently, and it's true that there's general support for those plans in place, having some, consideration going forward. But in terms of priority, the group had agreed that, the areas of the preferred growth areas of the growth plan really needed to be of forefront, because we're, again, considering those, collaborative energies and efforts, and those are meant to be directed to the areas of the growth plan, just because if you're spread too thin, then you can't be as effective as you could be if you're focusing on what we can all agree on, which the hope would be to those preferred growth areas. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wonder, thanks for the answer. I just wonder if any attention was given to the, what did you say, energy and efforts done in the past to get these ASPs that exist and the work done for some amendments, and was any weight given to that as in regards to energy and efforts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, we do want to add additional language in the servicing plan to say these may be of interest, and where there's opportunity to improve, absolutely. But again, to focus those efforts on the growth plan, because the regulation does state that we must be diligent in supporting the growth plan. So we will be revising, Reeve-Hen, the growth plan to include this sort of language.
Thank you, Jamie. Dan, did that answer your question?
Thank you. I'll say thank you.
Polite bunch today. Appreciate it. Councillor Curran, GC, you're up next.
Yeah, generally the City of Calgary is very supportive of the proposition that's before us. It supports the growth plan, and obviously we're a major player in terms of actually delivering servicing, and we want to make sure we're doing so in a cost-effective manner. And so making sure that services flow to the designated growth areas it makes a lot of sense. The only note I want to add, and this is just to give administration a heads up, and our admin will be talking to you guys about that. Excuse me, and with HDR Calthorpe, we're really sensitive to how we depict redevelopment coming out of a record-breaking 3-day public hearing into the Guidebook for Great Communities, which is an attempt to sort of really get straight how we're going to pursue redevelopment within our existing urban footprint. And it's very clear to us that if we depict growth as just occurring everywhere willy-nilly within our established areas, we are not sending the right message to our constituents, because there are some parts of our established areas that are not going to see a lot of growth and change, and some places that are going to be seeing a lot of growth and change. Like the regional plan, a lot of our growth is going to be directed towards transit-oriented development and along corridors and stuff like that. And so we would like the opportunity to work with CMRB administration and HDR Calthorpe to depict how growth occurs within the City of Calgary in a slightly more nuanced way than the current graphic display does, because we're finding that, whereas it might be characterized around this board table that that's providing unfair advantage to urban municipalities, I can assure you that the residents of those urban municipalities do not feel that's an advantage, and would like to see a more nuanced and thoughtful depiction of how infill growth will occur. And we'll work with you on that if that's okay.
GC, thank you for that. Jamie, any response? Any thoughts you want to share on that?
No, I think pretty straightforward, and we're happy to receive comments. So
good. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got Peter Brown. Mayor Brown, you're up next.
Thanks. Hi, Jamie. I'm not sure if I kind of got lost in some of the commentary a little bit, forgetting my place, but are we talking at all at the moment about the language surrounding corridors? Can I bring that up now?
Go for it.
Okay. So we've heard from our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, and we're frustrated that the language around the corridors hasn't really changed in the next version. So that we'd like to see more of an emphasis around my apologies. So it would impact transportation, transit, utility, and communication servicing. So to the committee, I guess, is identifying those corridors as being key to transportation, transit, utility, and communications servicing for the region. We believe the corridor approach needs to be strengthened in the servicing plan to ensure that transportation utility corridors are protected within the plan. So that would be my question, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah, Jamie, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Brown. So I think the detail and nuance that we can find going forward on each of the particular disciplines, because they are very nuanced based on their context of where they are located. We do have the maps that show where those corridors are. So any plan coming forward, and this is in the growth plan, would have to identify them and determine how to best mitigate impacts for them. And then in the approach of protecting for corridors going forward for growth, I think those are also ongoing conversations that will be informed by studies going forward. But I take your point that we don't talk a lot about that component in the servicing plan. So the point to reflect that might be something we could do. I wonder if HDR Calthorpe would have any further comment to that.
Hi, Jamie. Only to say that, yes, I think this is probably a discussion that needs to happen with TAG. When we had the TAG meeting, there seemed to be a desire. We had more detail in some of the corridors in the previous version. There seemed to be a desire in the meeting to have it removed, but then when we got the written comments back, we did, and Airdrie being one of them, we did have a few municipalities saying they wanted more detail on the corridors. We had others saying, thank you for removing it. So that discussion needs to go back to the TAG for that. We don't seem to be getting consistent feedback. So I think there's a need for there to be some discussion amongst the TAG to get that consistent.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for that. And Peter, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that we're going to re-look at that. So that's good to hear. Just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Go ahead.
So we're looking at, we're wondering if the committee is confident sort of on this bottom-up approach on collaboration, if it'll result in the most efficient approach to servicing growth in the region. We believe that the emphasis needs to be placed on ensuring that we're planning and servicing the entire region, not just in the JPAs, through the use of context studies. So I guess, because Stephen's here, I'd like to cut, well, I'm sorry, Jamie, I don't want to cut you off either, but just curious to know, do you believe that the process has been going in that direction? It's kind of what we're interpreting at our end, so really be curious to know what you think on that end. Thank you.
Sure, Jamie, do you want to start, or do you want me to jump in? Your call.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so I think, if you take a look at the priorities, and I think this latest version, I think one of the good pieces of feedback we got from TAG was the desire to see the priorities a little more clear. And so we sort of unpacked them from the longer discussion. And you'll see in each of the servicing areas, there are both region-wide priorities and priorities around preferred growth areas. So while there is certainly, I think, in the preferred growth areas and the context studies and that sort of thing, certainly I think it does need to be a bottom-up approach. But there is also region-wide priorities that are set to be a little bit more top-down. So it's really a blending of both. I don't see it as being one or the other. I think it's the most successful approaches to collaboration do come from two directions, and those region-wide priorities that are outlined in the servicing plan are intended to be a little more top-down with some of the more localized discussion, particularly the preferred growth areas being bottom-up. So it isn't intended to be one or the other. It's intended to be a combination.
Last question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
But
Sorry, and this may not be appropriate, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, Steve, you're building this plan, and I'm curious to know from a Calthorpe position, and maybe Peter is the one that has to answer, I'm not certain, but is this a Calthorpe plan? Is this the region's plan? What weight are you giving these discussions and this information as it relates to the final product? So you have your expertise in what you do and how you do it, and have for looks like decades. So I'm just trying to understand from my perspective, because I ask similar questions through this process, and I'm sort of being told that, yeah, we hear you, but we're not really listening to you. And if I'm having that interpretation, I apologize. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to understand how you're weighting. Like when this plan gets published on the 7th, is this a regional plan for the southern region of Alberta, or is this a Calthorpe manufacturer, or a combination of both? And I'll stop talking now, Mr. Chair. I think you know where I'm going, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a question. That's a Peter question, I think. Peter, are you still on? I know, yeah, there he is.
I'm right here. Obviously I'm a little taken aback by the idea that we're trying to impose a plan. We try to understand the nature of the place. It's why we studied all the place types and the growth patterns. It's why we did a whole series of scenarios about how growth was happening. We clearly built the patterns of development around the norms in your region that were quite unique and very specific. And I've said many, many times that a lot of it seemed to be, very much best practice, from the notion of infill, aggressive infill in Calgary, to the city center enhancements of many of the municipalities, to the almost normative mixed-use neighborhood development. All of it seemed to be building blocks that came from Calgary, not somewhere else. And they are the foundation of this plan. And it has very little to do with, I don't know if you want to call something a Calthorpe plan. It's not a Calthorpe plan. It's a plan for Calgary built out of the components that I think you're all aware of that are in your region. And then, the idea of putting in place preferred development areas, it's nothing to do with me or our firm. That's very much the status of almost all regional plans. They're being asked a fundamental question: where do you want to grow, and what do you want to protect? Where do you want to focus investment, and where do you want to conserve? What are your priorities in terms of the form of development? All these things are, some of it comes directly from the province in their requirements. So I guess your question is a little rhetorical, but I don't feel that this is anything to do with a result that comes from some other place. I know that there's been this talk of, well, we're from the United States and not from Canada, and so we don't get it. But and that may be true, but we've tried hard to listen and learn. We've looked very closely at what has been happening in your region, and we've used that as the fundamental backbone of this plan. And there's nothing in it that's not either required by the province or a direct affirmation of the best things that are going on in your region. So, that's the only way I could really respond to your question. But thank you for, I appreciate putting these kinds of issues on the table. If we hadn't been in the midst of COVID and we were all having meetings, we could speak frankly with each other on these kinds of concerns and maybe have put them to rest long ago. But we are now little tiles in a grid on a small screen, and it's hard to build trust and clarity out of that. We're doing our best. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll go on to Mayor Chalmers. I'll just note there's been a little bit of a back and forth between Jonathan and GC in response to Councillor Carraw's earlier question. The long and the short of it is that Calgary admin will follow up with CMRB admin to have the conversation that Councillor Carraw referenced earlier. And we'll now go to Mayor Chalmers. Marshall, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, my apologies for being late to the dance. It was unavoidable. Not so much to 4A, but I was wondering if, when the appropriate time, if we could just bounce back to 3. I did have some suggestions, in regards to the wording of B and C under 3. And I didn't know when the appropriate time would be. I don't want to interrupt the discussion on 4A. So
I think this is a perfect time. Jamie, we're back on that page. Okay, do you have some specific questions, Marshall?
Yeah, not questions, just suggestions for consideration, not extensive. But under 4B, on the first line where it says working groups have a mandate to find cost-effective ways, could we insert, or would we consider inserting and collaborative? Does that work for everybody or not?
Right.
Cost-effective and collaborative ways.
All right.
There's a lot of
reasonable feedback. I don't imagine anyone's going to raise a big objection to collaborating. That's the whole point for us being here. The servicing plan. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I was going to suggest under C, evidence-based decision making. So it says includes defining problems, collecting data, monitoring, reporting, and developing. If we could consider cost-effective strategies, could we insert cost-effective? And developing cost-effective strategies. Just some suggestions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Jamie, I see you furiously making notes there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mayor Chalmers.
Very good. Okay, good. So I appreciate that feedback. So then we're back on the question we were just discussing. If there's no more conversation on that particular point, perhaps we can move on to the next point then, Jamie.
Sounds good. Thanks. So the next area of discussion is really around agreed level of commitment. And it is right now implied that we're working together just as all of the rest of the servicing plan outlines. But we want to be quite clear about what it is and to what extent we're agreeing to collaborate. So I won't take the time to read all the details, but thinking about hypothetical examples, if you will, if a new ASP in Joint Planning Area 1 is consistent with the growth plan and requires water utility servicing, would all the subregional members in that area be required to investigate the potential for their infrastructure to provide service for that particular new growth? And so this really comes down to a question of, to what extent are we agreeing to commit together? And the question is, are all member municipalities obligated to come to the table as potential service providers to pursue the best option for servicing the planned growth that is in alignment with the growth plan? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and with that, any response to that question of whether all member municipalities are obligated to come to the table as potential service providers? Councillor Claassen, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. For me, the way I look at this is it should almost be like a may approach and an expression of interest kind of thing, because this board servicing group and the board ultimately would be able to decide if there's multiple options on which is the best approach, I think would be. And I think if you have an expression of interest, that would put some work involved in it and a submission kind of, just a general thing to move forward. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Revol, Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, thank you. In response to your question, we just wanted to share that we believe it should be voluntary in response to that question. Also, while the criteria mentioned does make sense, we may also want to consider the capacity of the municipality in question and what the impacts may be on their ability to undertake their own projects. So just keeping the big picture in mind and in answer to your question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we have Reef Hen up next.
Thanks to the chair. Yeah, we believe that if there is opportunities for shared servicing that are cost effective and minimize environmental impacts and generally make good sense, obviously they should be considered. We think municipalities should be obligated to come to the table for good faith discussions on potential shared servicing and shared information, but ultimately the decision to proceed should be in the hands of the service provider, because there are many considerations that go into shared servicing. Also like to add that perhaps there's a reluctance to share that servicing for one reason or another, that those reasons need to be clearly identified and supported by factual data. Thank you.
Appreciate that feedback. Thank you. Jamie, do you want to offer any feedback on either of any of the points made thus far?
No, I think they're really great feedback, and I see the point of Deputy Reeve Clausen's commentary around sort of like an expression of interest or an interest to evaluate further. So, yeah, I'm taking notes.
Great. Thanks very much. All right. Mayor Dunn, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. Just building on what others have said, the reason why we have this plan in the first place is to collaborate and find the best path forward together that saves money, et cetera, et cetera. So in my opinion, I think starting with a group approach to servicing makes the most sense. With that assumption in mind at the beginning, that it's going to be cost effective, it's going to be best for the region, it's going to work in all of those cases. So why wouldn't we want to start with the group first and then kind of whittle our way down so that it may not affect Cochrane? So thank you for being at the first meeting, but carry on. That type of approach is what I would like to see. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Councillor Corral, I think you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak firmly in support of the proposition that's before us. I think, if we agree that this is the smartest place and the smartest way for the region to grow, then everybody who's potentially able to provide servicing to achieve that growth should sit around the table and work out the best way to do that as well. We see that as an obvious outflow of this regional planning exercise that, and to the extent that the servicing plan is a plan to plan, I think if we agree that that's where growth should go, we should agree to work together to, accommodate that growth in the most cost-effective way. So we're supportive of this proposition. We're frankly a little bit amazed that people don't want to do that work together. That's the whole point of this endeavor.
Thanks, Councillor Corral. Mayor Chalmers, Marshall, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, in an ideal setting, I believe that, as many as possible that are affected should be at the table. But I think we also have to be realistic. And there was some comments made about capacity. In an ideal setting and with the process looking after and being mindful of all members, any member that is unable to sit at the table for whatever reason would have the confidence that their regional partners are looking after the region as a whole and not necessarily from a self-interest perspective. So, yes, it just makes more sense that everybody that can be there, but we also have to be mindful of capacity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that feedback. Anyone else care to share a comment or ask a question on this point? Okay, seeing and hearing none, why don't we move on, Jamie, to the next one? Or you want to offer some feedback there, Jamie? Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Clark. Just a final thought that I think it's really important that we were having that conversation, although it may seem obvious. I think many communities around the table want to hear from each other that there is that level of commitment and comfort with moving forward in this way. So I just want to thank the committee for all the feedback, and I'm hearing general overall support of this idea. So thanks, Chair Clark.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay. Why don't we move on to the next question?
Okay. Following that is that one of the questions that came up in the discussion with administrations is this sense of staging growth among preferred growth areas as it relates to servicing. But that's because, municipal investment in support of a growth node is directed first to one area, perhaps, and then sometimes to another in staging. And at the regional scale, given the board's focus areas and their values, and acknowledging that all municipalities are independent entities of their own, with their own values, economies, and the style of community that they're offering, it would be difficult to stage regional growth in a servicing way, or kind of prioritizing it one over another. So one particular urban area over a JPA as an example. So there might be unintended consequences to the market of that, which should be avoided. So the purpose of this question is really to get that anchor of, does the committee agree that in preferred growth areas, market demand in alignment with the context studies or with the available information or the need that comes out will determine the order that the board responds to collaborative servicing priorities? That would be the question that I'd love to get some input on from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Carras popped his name in there. GC, go ahead.
Yeah, I've sort of broached this subject around this table before. I'm going to do it again because I think it's exactly pertinent. So, what we've done in the city of Calgary over the last 10 years that I've had the honor of being a member of Calgary City Council is we've done a deep dive into, in the past, how we grew and how we need to grow moving forward. And, we determined, first off, that we had been basically taking our taxes and subsidizing growth on the edge and building a city that made increasingly less and less dollars and cents over time. And that we needed to be a lot more thoughtful about how we grew. Having said that, we understand that we cannot accommodate all of the growth coming into the city of Calgary within the established areas, and we have to strike a balance. And our stated objective is to strike a balance of 50-50 growth over the 60, over the next 50 years. Basically, 50% of the growth will occur on the edge of the city, and 50% of the growth will occur as redevelopment in our established areas. And then the question comes down to the fact that we understand that growth cannot occur without public investment. So we've shifted our game from subsidizing growth mindlessly to investing thoughtfully in growth with the understanding that we have a limited number of public dollars, and where we invest our dollars has to make the most dollars and cents and has to get the most bang for our buck. And so when we understood that we were investing public dollars to support the most cost effective and the most, environment saving and the most economy diversifying growth, we literally engage with our development industry in a basically a portfolio management and an investment scenario. And in 2018, we made the decision to support 11 business cases, 14 new communities on the edge. In 2020, we decided that we hadn't seen sufficient return on our investment to invest further and to spread the butter thinner. I would highly recommend that as we start to turn our attentions collaboratively to growth within the region, particularly within joint planning areas, that we should take a very similar investment-based approach and, basically receive offers to partner public dollars with private sector investment to see what bang we can get and to pursue it in that way. So generally, I think that we can't grow in all directions at all times. willy-nilly, because that doesn't make sense. The whole point of this exercise is to be thoughtful and to be thoughtful together. And I would highly recommend taking an approach like that, like an investment portfolio approach, where we understand our limited dollars have to be, wielded to the maximum effect, and to do that work together. So I would love to see that kind of work take place and get ensconced in how we propose to move forward together.
Okay, Councillor Cross, thank you for that feedback. We'll go to Reeve Hen. Dan, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I think it's important that we respect municipal autonomy. We should focus on market demand, and many municipalities would not be involved in context studies, so we shouldn't dictate their growth through a process that doesn't involve them. Context studies, we think, should inform collaborative growth, but not dictate it, I guess. For example, if Cochrane and Rockview or Wheatland and Strathmore see an opportunity for collaborative shared servicing, that shouldn't be restricted just because it isn't in a context study. There's been some wording around staging that should be clarified, and to make it clear that each municipality should determine staging as it's in its portion of the JPA's. Context studies will inform this process and then not dictate it. So that's what I have here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Jamie, do you want any feedback you want to offer on either of those points?
No, only to say that I think the context study wording may have thrown off my intention, which was to understand that when a need comes up in preferred growth areas, that the board looks to all the needs and not just to one in a preferred growth area, or not just one in a JPA, not just one in a Hamlet growth area, but understand the need as they arise and as the market demands or the market runs out of capacity, for example, and there becomes a need. So that's sort of the nuance that I meant in my question, but I see from your comment, Reeve Hen, that may not have come through in the question. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and just would wonder if you had any further reflections given that clarification.
And any response to that? Go ahead.
Not right now, no. Again, I think I put together what I had there more in the context of context studies. So maybe give me a minute and I'll have something brilliant, but not at this point.
Thank you.
All right, very meta. That's very good. Okay, we'll go to Reeve. Suzanne, you've got the floor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, thank you, Jamie, for providing that clarification. That helped a little bit to remove that context. Thank you so much. When we read this, we actually have some more questions to pose, and some of the dialogue was referring to that. I'll state it anyways. How would this be determined? Who decides? And what efficiency, or would efficiency be considered as well? So again, when we get into the details here, we're going to be wanting to know how this actually functions. So that would be our comments on this one. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Jamie. Response to that?
Thanks, Revol. I don't have a hard and fast idea of how these would, because there's so many. There's various servicing elements that we're talking about. So I think, the iteration and the plan to plan really shows that we really need to continue to get together from time to time with those experts to really identify what the priorities are and see or foresee kind of the demands that will come with time. So I think while I don't have the answer to your question. I think that that's the purpose of the servicing plan, to anticipate and to gather the right people to make those decisions about when the board takes action on investigating the next servicing need that arises.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else care to weigh in on this question here before us? Okay, so seeing none, Jamie, how would you like to proceed? Are we going to dive into the document itself, or is this what you were hoping to achieve today?
For me, this is what I needed. In terms of go forward and next steps, maybe I can update if you don't mind, Chair. The committee, the document is out for commentary by TAG, and we've had some recent discussions, and there will be some updates to the document as it is refined following the feedback that we received today, and also what may come in the days ahead. And we anticipate that the next version will be released for the next board meeting, which the agenda will be out on April 29th. So I just wanted to offer that. And to my colleagues at HDR Calthorpe, is there any additional things that I missed or anything that you might need?
No, I think this is what we talked about previously, and these were the topics that I think there was still some outstanding input needed. So I think that was good input. And thanks, Jamie. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. We've made some good progress. Revol, I see you on the speaking list. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you. While we're ending here today on this topic and with these questions, we did spend the time to also come up with a few thoughts. So would those then be welcome in the next discussion after the TAG review, and the next discussion, I guess, would be at the board level? Is that where you're thinking?
Yeah, for next board meeting, yes. But I would be interested to know the comments, and I don't know if they could be forwarded through myself and HDR, or if you would like to bring them up now, Revol.
Sure. Well, in interest of the meeting, I'll ask the chair where you would like to head with it. They aren't long, but I do recognize that perhaps they can be sent in written form as well. Yeah, well,
let's maybe do both. If there's something you'd like to share now, go ahead, please, and share with Jamie through and the committee, and also through TAG as well.
Well, thank you. Again, there's not a lot at this point. We just wanted to state that overall the plan contemplates a very huge amount of work, and that we should be careful not to undertake projects for which there will be demonstrated benefit and where there is an actual need to be addressed. So we should only undertake those projects. That's our thoughts after reviewing everything here. And 2 points, one under recreation and one under implementation. Under recreation, the plan states that creating a common understanding of the current state of recreation in the region would require region-wide data gathering and assessment, study, and summary. And we just want to note that municipal members may have differing capacities to undertake that data gathering, and we just want to give the example that municipalities where numerous aspects of their operations of their facilities are facilitated through the use of volunteers, that this is an impactful statement here. And we wanted to just conclude that one with the working group should be mindful of the differences in capacity. So that being a matter in this servicing plan, wanted to draw attention to that. And lastly, under implementation, once again, the data collection issue comes up, and that municipalities' capacity should be taken into consideration, as should the cost benefit of collecting the data in question. So basically, the money and capacity should not be used to collect data for data's sake, and data should have a demonstrated purpose and provide an important benefit. And as we always weigh these things during all of our planning processes, it's need versus want. So I just wanted to share that on behalf of the county. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Revol, thank you very much for that. Anyone else like to share any comments, thoughts, or questions at this time? Okay, so I will happily entertain a motion. I will just say, just in terms of a reminder of the process, and Jamie, confirm that I'm correct on this. We have tag meetings tomorrow, the 16th, and again on the 22nd. Those will do the deep dive on both the growth plan and the servicing plan. The outcome of that will be included in the agenda package for the May 6th board meeting, and you should see that agenda package no later than the 29th of April. Is that accurate, Jamie?
It is. I would also mention that the majority of the time going to be spent tomorrow and also on the 22nd will be on the growth plan elements. We really feel like we've got quite a bit of good direction and not a ton of refining to do on the servicing plan as it stands, although, certainly the feedback that came today will be looked at. So just wanted to add that clarification, Chair Clark, on that detail.
That's a wonderful segue, because that is the next topic for our agenda. And I see Mayor Robertson, living in the future as always, has moved a motion to receive for information. Anyone care to second that motion? We'll need at least one. There we go. We have Deputy Reeve Klassen. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion to receive for information? All right, seeing none. Anyone will do this by exception. Anyone wishing to vote opposed to the motion that the committee provide feedback on and receive for information the draft servicing plan? Anyone wishing to vote opposed? All right, seeing none, hearing none, that motion carries and we are through that agenda item. I will recommend now perhaps we take a 10-minute break, come back, we'll make it 9, come back precisely at 2:30 this afternoon to dive into the next agenda item. had some good discussion so far. I know we've got some heavy lifting yet to do here, though, as we get into those areas for further consideration around the growth plan. So now that we're all back, I assume, and at this point, I will turn it over to Lisa for her summary to take us through items 7 through 12, and there's some further information in the document beyond that I think we'd like to get to as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. This is a continuation of the April 1st agenda item. Some of the wording was updated to provide some additional clarity as we got feedback from our member municipality administration staff. Sorry, someone is noisy. Here we go. So this is a continuation of that item. As we moved through table 1 at the April 1st meeting, and that feedback that we received from you was very helpful in informing the tag discussion that followed as we went through the same line items on the table, always keeping your comments in mind and always keeping some of the things we've heard from the public engagement in mind. I'd like to continue forward today on the remainder of the table items in 7 to 12 and continue to get your feedback on those items. They will be informing the discussion, as was the case with items 1 to 6 at the TAG meeting tomorrow, which will happen in the morning and the afternoon. And we really look forward to your thoughts and guidance on these matters. And we'll try and work towards some technical ways to move forward with the approaches that you've put forward for us. In terms of number 7, continuing forward, we are looking at Hamlet growth areas, and some of the feedback that we received was really that Hamlet growth areas shouldn't require board approval. And we did discuss this a little bit at the last TAG, and one of the things that came up is there was a sentiment that the plan is not that clear that the 3 Hamlet growth areas that have been allocated to foothills do not require board approval in order to have a location and be developed. So in other words, we don't know their location right now. They shouldn't have to come to the board in order to verify their location. They are a need that Foothills has to accommodate their growth, and therefore, they will be allowed to allocate them as per their own needs, knowing that they have this growth coming to them. So we went through and we discussed that, and although we felt that, or we had understood that the policy did already say that, there was a lack of clarity there. So there are some proposals before TAG tomorrow to increase the clarity of that item around the 3 Hamlet growth areas for Foothills County. In terms of other Hamlet growth areas, it's felt that, and the recommendation coming forward based on the feedback we've had to date, is that no change is proposed to this policy, that the board should have the opportunity to review the location of Hamlet growth areas. They are a preferred growth area, which, as we just discussed under the servicing plan, does carry a lot of weight around obligating members to come to the table to discuss servicing, around working together on servicing and having support for service delivery in those areas and service optimization. So that's one consideration. In addition, even at the 640 acres, which is still a discussion on whether that's the appropriate number, if we look at how they would build out in the preferred place types, it is a substantial population. And so for those reasons, it was felt that the recommendation here being provided to you today is for discussion is that they continue to come to the board for approval as a Hamlet growth area, and that is in alignment with the goals and principles of the growth plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking forward to comments.
Okay, thank you very much. We have Revo up first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Lisa for her clarification, as we certainly support that revision and understanding being more clear. So I just wanted to thank you for that, sharing that today, and appreciate that we're going to have some further conversation. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Mayor Jung, Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. For all of the reasons that Lisa just outlined, Cochrane agrees full-heartedly with the recommended action of administration that this absolutely should come back to the board. So agreed with what's presented with to us today, and like to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reeve Hen. Dan, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just would like to ask Lisa if there was any more debate tag around this 640 acre limitation that's being proposed. We just think that the criteria for creating a new growth hamlet should be considered along with creating some employment areas and things like that. And we just don't think a size restriction is necessary. You know, a proposed area should be justified through appropriate rationale and not just have an arbitrary number put on it. So at this point, that's our biggest sticking point with the hamlet growth areas is this 640 acre number. Just at this point, it just completely doesn't make sense.
Thank
Thanks
you for your
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry for interrupting you. Thank you for your comment, Reeve. We do understand with any numbers, of course, there's always a certain amount of, is that the right number? Is that not the right number? The purpose of having a number is really to prove that, or to show that there is a demand for development in that area, that area will be successful and will build out in a timely way. And so whether 640 is exactly the right number or not, we don't know that for sure, and look forward to having those discussions at TAG tomorrow. I will put it on my list of topics that we are going to go over. But I think Mr. Calthorpe has turned on his camera and he'd like to add to this. But I think in general, the idea is that the hamlet growth areas play a really important role in terms of both population and employment growth in the rural areas. And that, a certain amount of size helps to prove it's approval of concept, basically, that there is demand for growth in those areas, that they can be effectively serviced, and then they can be expanded over time under the policies of the plan. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Calthorpe, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair, to allow him to elaborate more.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Well, actually, Lisa, you just said exactly what I was going to say, which is that the idea here, 640 acres is small in some circumstances. It represents around maybe 7,000 population. So for some of the rural counties, that's actually a fairly large segment of their growth expectations and allocations. But I think the significant issue here that Lisa just outlined is that it's meant to be a starting point. So a successful hamlet, you would like to phase it so that it's clustered in a coherent way. And then if it's really successful and valuable, it can grow and the jurisdiction can bring back for expansion. The problem with a very large area, of course, is that, the first 20 years of growth may be quite scattered within that domain, given the numbers that are being looked at for the county population growth. And so having isolated, scattered development within a hamlet size that ultimately may be correct may prove to be pretty awkward in terms of its phasing. So it's an effort to make the early phases of a hamlet compact and efficient, but not to limit the ultimate growth of a hamlet.
Appreciate that context. Thank you, Peter. Anyone else have any questions or comments on this item?
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I could.
You bet. Go ahead.
So to Mr. Calthorpe, I just want, is there, in this policy, is there a plan that allows for expansion, something that in the growth plan that says expansion is allowed? And again, getting back to, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the word phasing. And I'd like to point out that Rockview does have a hamlet with just a little less than 7,000 people, and it is around 2,200 acres. So, and that's it's fairly by county standards, the density's kind of up there. So, anyways, just to comment on that question, if there's if the plan allows for expansion, we just haven't seen it in there.
Lisa, maybe you can elaborate, but my understanding is that the jurisdiction could come back to the board and propose expansions to hamlets. They can modify the boundaries of JPAs. All of this is meant to be a living document where over time things evolve in the most positive direction. The key to get a really healthy starting point is to have an area that can be built out in a coherent manner in the early phases rather than really be the basis for scattered development.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I really appreciate Reeve Henn's point. I do think we need to double check that, as similar to the Hamlet growth areas, because there is a certain level of preciseness in some of the policies of the plan, we really require that clarity to ensure that, if a hamlet is successful and is serving an important role in a rural municipality, we should be looking at how and if and how and when and through what process the boundaries of that may be expanded. So I appreciate that point a lot, that this might be somewhere where the plan isn't as clear as it could be. And we will definitely look forward to working with TAG to provide that clarity, because I think it is the intent of the plan, although, Mr. Calthorpe can also speak to this, but I do think it is the intent of the plan to allow those areas to be successful, provided they're mixed use and they're fulfilling a really important need locally and regionally. So, if it's a successful hamlet, we should definitely make sure that clarity is there.
Yeah, that's great, Lisa. Thank you. Dan, did that answer your question, or do you want to weigh in again?
Just a real quick follow-up, and again, Mr. Calthorpe touched on it. So yes, absolutely. If there's a initial limitation and then there's a plan that allows for expansion, it needs to be in the document, which again, we just don't see it now. Once Mr. Calthorpe and his associates have gone and left us municipalities up in Alberta to deal with this plan, we need something that's going to tell us what we agreed to do. And again, there's nothing in the plan that we see that allows for expansion of a hamlet. And as Jamie says, it really needs to be firmly addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that wraps a bow around that agenda item, or that item number 7 in the table. So Lisa, why don't we move on, head to the next one, go to number 8.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Again, another point of discussion that's come up around hamlet growth areas is around densities. The densities have been in previous versions of the plan higher than they appear in the current draft of the plan. Those densities were lowered in order to accommodate that feedback that they were too high. We are still hearing from some of the members and some of the rural residents that these numbers are still too high, and they are not reflective of the kind of rural lifestyle and character that those rural residents are really looking for. There's always, of course, the balance of you need and require a certain amount of density to efficiently provide services, to optimize the delivery of services, to ensure a community that has, a certain amount of cohesiveness and quality to it. So for those reasons, we believe or are recommending that no revision is proposed here. These numbers have already been revised. However, we do understand there are a range of perspectives on this, and we look forward to committee feedback on if this issue should be revisited at TAG, and to what degree, what is the quality or we're looking for here from the committee. Is the committee, how we would like the densities to ensure that they are supportive of the directions of the growth plan and the objectives of the growth plan. So if the committee can provide us with any feedback and direction on its will in this matter, we look forward to discussing it with TAG tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Anyone willing to provide any feedback or direction as per Lisa's request? Councillor Carroll, go ahead, GC.
Yeah, we support the recommendation of administration that's before us. We understand the need to sort of strike a contextual balance between efficient servicing and the rural lifestyle that's being proposed. But at a certain lack of density, it's no longer a hamlet. It's a residential or country subdivision, or I'm forgetting what we're calling that. But, the whole point of this growth plan is that we have place types, and once you get above a certain threshold, you're into the next place type. And once your hamlet reaches a certain size, you're into a joint planning area. I understand the sort of the desire, the very clear desire not to be constrained in any way that's being voiced by some members of this board. But the whole point of this exercise is to constrain ourselves and to constrain ourselves thoughtfully. So I guess we're very supportive of administration's position. And, while we're open to, getting the numbers right, we also recognize that this is a living document that will evolve and change over time as, the reality of situations, calibrates what we're proposing to do here. And so I'm City of Calgary's supportive of administration's recommendations.
Great, Gigi. Thank you very much. Thanks for that feedback. Reeve Ole, Suzanne, you're next.
Well, thank you for the conversation. I think this one overlaps from the previous discussion and onto this one. And I do want to clarify that some communities are not looking for unbridled development, and that we actually have got planning processes in place within our own counties in terms of defining our own growth area based on servicing and the best location. So I just want to clarify that. And then further, in regards to the density, I appreciate the ongoing discussion because, I know we're putting this up here for a possibility of one way or other, but if we could keep the conversation going, we have to make this workable for us. This is something that we're facing in terms of a lifestyle, as was mentioned, and also the tolerance within our own communities, because the density isn't something that is in, for example, in infill location or in the growth hamlet areas where in identified in the plan, there might be an interest in that being achieved over time. So our comment is really, could we keep that conversation going in regards to how it actually fits? It doesn't fit right at this time, it's not attainable. And could we achieve those targets over time? We talked about, I believe the comments in the previous item was in relation to providing the coherent manner of build out, and if that was something that could be considered in how this is defined further, there might be a way for us to be able to achieve that. So those are our comments at this time on this matter. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Mayor Janung has just noted we agree with the recommendation, see no revision necessary. So, Jeff, thank you for that. And Reeve Henn, you're up next.
Yeah, no, sorry. I guess I couldn't type quite fast enough. No, you can ignore that request to speak.
All right, we're taking you off the list. Okay, thank you very much. All right, any other comments on number 8 here? We'll move on to number 9. Going once, going twice. All right, Jamie, Lisa, go ahead. Number 9.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. The rural and country cluster, I think, has probably been one of the policies or policy directions where we have had the most amount of of feedback. There is the rural country cluster development doesn't have a locational requirement, unlike many of the other forms of place types and growth types that we are looking at here. We've gotten a lot of feedback that the number of units are too low, that the amount of open space requirement is too high, they're not flexible enough, or they're not financially viable in their current form. So you may as well just remove them from the document altogether, because they're just, as the policy is written, it's not actually a functional place type or growth type of any kind. We have had a little bit of discussion about this at TAG, but it is on the agenda for tomorrow. Rocky View County has provided a proposal, and HDR Calthorpe has provided a proposal in light of the Rocky View County proposal. So we look forward to having that discussion tomorrow. What we are hoping for from the committee to guide this is, one of the reasons why the growth plan has provided limits on size and requirements for such significant open space is that this is a little bit of a diversion from some of the other goals of the plan, to have a mixed use, to emphasize mixed use communities, to emphasize communities and the location of those communities. But there is definitely a rural need and desire for this type of development that's sort of a country residential in nature, but done better, done with more open space, done with smaller lots, done with a more comprehensive plan for servicing. So we look forward to the committee's feedback on this item in terms of the direction about, how big do we want these to be? Are we of course, as we increase the dwelling units, we are increasing the number of residents that are living in this community form. As we lower the open space requirements, we increase the design flexibility of them and allow for a different range of lot sizes and lifestyles within that community in terms of, home sizes and lot sizes. But what are we hoping to achieve with these from the committee's perspective? And we look forward to any feedback you have on any thoughts you have around country cluster residential and how you hope to see it perform.
Okay, so it sounds like we're on the cusp tomorrow of having a fairly detailed discussion about this at TAG, but you're looking for indicative, broad strokes, general perspective of the committee on this question. Is that a fair way of characterizing it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It is. I think this one has been kind of a flashpoint because, all of the other types of growth we're talking about are very mixed use, are, trying to push densities a bit higher. This one pushes country residential into a better design form, a better design. But in terms of some of the other goals of the plan, it's maybe not as consistent with those. So, we would like to have a sense of how much we would like to control these, if we want to keep a population threshold there, do we want to bump it up so they're financially viable, but not so much that they become really substantial communities. That kind of general feedback on quality would be great. And also we have Mr. Calthorpe to better explain the role of country cluster in the growth plan if need be.
Sure, that sounds good. We've got Reeve Hen got your name on the list. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, through the chair. So this growth plan states that the cluster residential development should be encouraged to locate in areas where infrastructure and services can be provided. But then it doesn't provide clear locational criteria for this place type. And the concerns are, without a strong locational criteria, this allows dispersed development in rural areas and detracts from existing country residential communities. It's not clear why we would restrict the benefits of modest density increases in existing country residential areas, but encourage density that's more in more remote locations outside of these areas. The policies as written are just create unsustainable growth patterns and undermine the intent of the growth plan, we feel. So, just again with these densities, as Lisa said, it makes for sort of unsustainable cluster developments. It's just that the infrastructure is expensive, and you need a certain amount of density to make that economically feasible. So I'll let others go ahead.
Good. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that feedback. Suzanne Reboul, you're up next.
Well, thank you. If you look at what we're dealing with in terms of the definition or the excerpt from the growth plan in the second column, we're qualifying this development by in locations where infrastructure and services can be provided. So you are identifying the need for servicing and doing this better, but it's just not, the economics aren't there for the numbers that are given. So we appreciate this opportunity for the conversation so that we could dive into that, and I hope that can be brought forward in the conversation at TAG tomorrow, and see if there's some thoughtful consideration on the numbers that could be amenable so that we can achieve what this form is intended to achieve. Currently, it's offered as an option, but just as you've heard other comments, it isn't working out when it comes to the numbers and the intent. So I'll just leave it at that. But ultimately, we echo the sentiments that the conversation needs to be had in terms of working this out to be viable. Thank you very much.
Okay, Suzanne, thank you very much for that feedback. Councillor Carra, GC, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting situation because I think we all acknowledge that country residential, the market is extremely saturated. That it has significant servicing challenges, and if you get too much of it, it blankets the landscape and sort of wipes out the working landscape. It wipes out the ecological recharge that open space allows, and it becomes, not that beautiful to have just blankets of large lot acreages. At the same time, we want to recognize first out, we want farmers to be able to subdivide their field to make space for family members and stuff like that. And I think that what we're trying to suggest is that above a certain density, this should become a hamlet, and we should concentrate the growth and create more of a mixed use serviceable community. So I don't understand. I don't understand why we're not collectively appreciating that, there are challenges with with country residential. So let's cluster it to protect open space, and at a certain size, let's create hamlet. Let's change the typology to be a hamlet. That seems like a very sensible thing. I think we've got a large number there to accommodate outlandish, situations, but I don't think we're going to see the market deliver major subdivisions of country residential. And if they want to, do standalone development, design it as a hamlet. And if the hamlet wants to get bigger, create a joint planning area where we can work together to provide the servicing and the transit and everything that's required. That is the building block of this plan. It makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I don't understand objections to it outside of the fact that they just represent constraints to growth, which are not generally appreciated by some people. I think that the whole point of this exercise is to be thoughtful in how we constrain growth and to work together to make sure we have the best possible outcomes. So we haven't heard anything around the City of Calgary table that suggests that these numbers need to be adjusted toward, and we're supportive of where they're at right now.
Yeah. Thanks, GC. We'll go on to Reeve Hen. Given that this is going before TAG tomorrow, and I appreciate there are some different perspectives on it, but I think we've heard kind of both ends of that spectrum. But Dan, we'll go to you, and after that, if there's anyone who wishes to add something novel to this discussion, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll move on. So Dan, go ahead.
So respectfully to Councillor Craw, sorry, this isn't directed at Councillor Craw, but maybe just to address the comments. If it was in the document that's how it worked, maybe there'd be a little less resistance. But currently, there's nothing in the document that says that's how it works. So if it comes back and the densities need to go higher, and okay, now we're going to a Hamlet deal, needs to go to the board. Nothing in the document supports it, and it gets turned down by the board. That's where we're at. I mean, we just need the document to be clear on how it works. There's a bunch of other things I'd like to say too, but yes, in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that.
And thank you. Although I think that's really, I think, a very helpful, maybe jumping off point as this conversation heads to TAG tomorrow. Lisa, I think that's some useful feedback. If that is in fact as intended, if it's possible to document that, sounds like that would be very helpful. So we'll put that ball in your capable court. Anything else on this before we move on to the next item? All right, seeing and hearing none. On to number 10. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The discussion of employment areas and local employment areas, which will follow from this one, is something that has come up quite a bit in the public engagement. As maybe Anne mentioned, we had a lot more attendance in the afternoon sessions than in the evening session. And in those sessions, there were a number of representatives from the development community who have projects that are not inside preferred growth areas. And it really highlighted the need to just have this discussion with the committee. Employment areas right now are considered to be, and I've provided the definition here for you as it sits in the March 17th version of this plan. There are a variety of industrial and commercial land uses that may include office complexes, research parks, warehousing, and manufacturing. So in other words, they're larger employment areas. They provide a significant workforce. And in terms of the policies of the growth plan, there's a strong, and maybe Mr. Calthorpe can speak to this, there's a strong goal of the plan to tie these two together. There's bring folks working in communities, allow them to work in their communities, allow them to work in areas that are easily commutable or can take transit to their jobs. It really, there's lots of research around this that shows that connecting people and jobs together is part of strengthening your economic development and your diversification of your economy. So in this plan, although it talks about employment areas must be referred to in place types, that's kind of the underlying drive behind connecting those two things together. So as I mentioned, there in the next one, we'll talk about local employment areas, which would provide local services to residents that are not living inside or next to or near preferred growth areas. But in terms of employment areas, that's the reason why they are allowed, or under the plan, the policies promote them or encourage them or allow them within preferred growth areas, which include joint planning areas, Hamlet growth areas, existing municipalities. So that's the purpose of this. We are currently recommending no revision to this as it is such a core element of the plan and such an important way of creating synergies between where people work, the jobs that they have, where they live, and connecting all those things together with services. So we look forward to the committee's discussion of this and to help us refine our understanding of employment areas so that we can tidy up the policy as need be. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone care to weigh in on the question of employment areas? Revol, Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much. This is a really important matter for us, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chime in on this. And you know, one of the biggest things that we're mentioning and giving us airtime here is so appreciated. Just to really summarize it, is the restriction of development of employment areas only to preferred growth areas is unfair to our rural municipalities and will in our opinion, hamper that economic recovery that we're all trying to focus on right now and provide opportunity to all of our citizens. Only rural municipalities have the areas that are not preferred growth areas, just to clarify. So only rural municipalities are being restricted as to where they can locate employment areas. Employment areas should be able to be located where they make sense and where there is market demand. So our request is the definitions around employment areas and local employment areas needs refinement so they do not create unforeseen difficulties. We would really appreciate this conversation to be open and go on to the tag tomorrow so that there's this opportunity for us to clarify and really dive into something of great importance to us. Thank you so much.
Great, we both thank you very much. There's that feedback. I think I see you making notes there, so you're noting that down. Reeve Hamlet, Dan, go ahead.
Thanks to the chair. So we really feel that this proposal contradicts many statements that's made by HDR Calthorpe, and that the intention was to allow the market to determine where employment areas should be located. Limiting employment in viable areas is not wise in a time when encouraging economic development is critically important. I mean, we just can't stress that enough. Rural municipalities have been limited in creating or expanding employment areas, and a good example of that is in the case of Springbank in Rocky View. So, yeah, we're not in agreement with this policy at all. Sorry. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Peter Brown just notes he's supportive of the staff's recommendation. Peter, do you want to speak to that, or just that readout is okay?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just I have to ask the Reeves and the Deputy Reeves that are online today that while I appreciate their commentary around this specific issue, but that's really why we're here, that any pro forma that's done on a rural piece of land outside of a significant urban area counts on those urbans to support, work there, shop there, do whatever. So, I mean, the crux of the issue is still that issue. So we need to overcome it. And I don't know what the right way to do it is. There's lots smarter people than me in this room, but that's what we have to do. And there has to be a recognition from our rural colleagues that without those urbans, there's no one that's going to want to develop in those areas to the significance of what you're proposing. So once we go over this and figure out how we can either A, share revenue in development or however that might look, that's what we seem to have to continually overcome. And I guess I'm just getting frustrated with hearing it continually, yet there's no recognition that there isn't anywhere that the urbans provide the value to those developments. Without it, they're not sustainable, period. Anyway, I'm, as you can tell, I'm frustrated, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. No, thanks, Peter, for that. Appreciate that, Mayor Brown. Deputy Reeve Clausen, you're up next.
Hello. Just kind of speaking to the idea of transit and with this growth areas and the employment areas. And I always try to relate stuff to what I actually see going on. And I'm not picking on any municipality, but I have my job is to drive for a living, and I drive up and down 52nd Avenue in Calgary. And I follow buses up and down, and I see people, going into the foothills industrial area, for instance. These people get off a bus and they have no sidewalk to walk on. They have no place to go. I see them slipping off onto 52nd and just about getting hit by vehicles. So this theory that we're talking about, unless it's actually full built out, doesn't really work. And I don't know how to say it without being blunt, but I see it and I understand where the idea is from it, but I still see a multitude of vehicles driving, and to think people are going to get out of their vehicles to go on a bus or in rural populations. I know my wife had worked at TELUS, and she talked about, hopping on transit and going downtown. In theory, it doesn't actually work. So just wanted to state that, like, I see it all the time, and if it worked and if it actually people used it, I could see it, but I just don't see it now. So I don't know how you can force people to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Corral, you've indicated Calgary's support of admin's recommendations. Do you want to weigh in, or is that comment sufficient?
Well, I mean, I just want to maybe caution everybody that, a lot of decisions that are made by the city of Calgary, and I agree, we don't have a lot of sidewalks in our industrial areas, and our industrial areas were set up for people to drive to, by and large. But we do know that there is a tremendous number of people who those businesses are dependent on that do use transit to get to and from, and do ride their bikes into, and it's not everybody. It's actually not the majority of people. The majority of people drive, but we do know that a lot of our industrial sector businesses in the industrial southeast, which I have the honor of representing, take transit and they ride their bikes, and we have to accommodate those people. And as we build new, we have to make sure that we don't repeat mistakes of the past. So, we all have lived experience. We all live within our bubbles. We all see the things that we see. And then there are, the facts of the matter that are driving the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And, getting back to this regional plan, we have a very sophisticated analysis of the data. And we understand that if we pursue together a thoughtful constraint of growth, it will be more cost effective. It'll be better for the environment. It will be better for business and all of those things. And so we're supportive of administration's recommendations in this regard as well.
Great. Thanks, GC. Rebol, Suzanne, you're up next.
I just want to thank everybody for their comments. It just brings up an opportunity to help clarify things that may be impassioned, and maybe a little bit of information helps to just settle it a little bit. I do want to say that we recognize the importance of our urban neighbors, and we count on them as well. I believe they count on us, and we help sustain each other. And in that recognition, we do have cost-sharing agreements, and we do include our neighbors in our planning as well as they include us. We have intermunicipal agreements, and we have the opportunity for constantly bringing things forward with our intermunicipal committees. So we do rely on each other, I think, without getting into the reverse toll conversation. I think we can actually recognize that. And here, we're just asking that on our 914,000 acres in the county, that we not be limited to a couple of spots in a couple of places throughout the entire county. And currently, there is not enough clarity to understand how limiting this policy is going to be to us. And we're quite concerned because what we see is much of a shutdown. And yet at the same time, we are indicating our willingness to work with everybody and have so in the past. We have records of that. We have agreements where we've used as an example here at this board, and we don't plan on doing things differently. We plan on continuing with great communication and all this. We just find that this plan is limiting, and that's what we're speaking to here today. So again, thank you for the dialogue. So provided an opportunity to state that, and I appreciate the perspectives, and I look forward to continuing to try to sort this out. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Reeve, Dan, you're up next.
Well, this is a question to you, Mr. Chair. In regards to Mayor Brown's comments, I know that we're on the time clock here. If we're going to have that debate today or one day, because I've got a lot to say to those remarks. So I'll leave that to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, look, the purpose of these committees and this board as a whole is to have hard discussions. I certainly don't think we ought to shy away from that. I think we always, and I've seen good examples of being respectful and having those discussions. It is a conversation I think we'll have it at the board level as well. Certainly, we're still okay on time, and there's a couple more things we do want to get through, and we want to make sure we give them some consideration. But I, certainly no hesitation if you'd like to have some of that discussion today. We're here. Let's use this time together, and feel free to share your views.
Thank you so much. So I guess that's my cue to go.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so to Mayor Brown's comments, I mean, to start with, there's two sides of the coins. I think the rural municipalities support support their urban neighbors, and I think it works both ways. But I just don't quite understand why the mayor feels that employment areas in rural municipalities would fail if it wasn't for the urban neighbors. Obviously, yes, for sure, we count on their business. But when we talk about a Lowe's fulfillment center, I don't see a lot of Airdrie people flocking to its doors, or a John Deere dealership. Not a lot of urbans are going there, although I do understand perhaps that they buy some lawnmowers there. This tit for tat, and shouldn't, in my opinion, be part of the conversation. Part of the conversation is that if there's someone planning to develop in our region, or any region, whether it's Airdrie, Calgary, Rocky View, Foothills, there should be an opportunity to do so. And the way this growth plan's coming together, it's limiting opportunities for employment areas in rural in the rural municipalities. Plain and simple. Again, I don't want to point fingers on who's supporting who. We support the urbans support us. It's all good. And I agree, 100%, let's work together. But the way this plan is looking to Rocky View, and I think the other rurals will agree, it's limiting our ability to create these employment centers. So I don't think it's a conversation about who's supporting who and that we're trying to be difficult to deal with here. We just want to have the opportunity, plain and simple. And I really, it's unfortunate that there's a perception there that we're trying and take money off people's pockets, but that's not the point. We just want a seat at the table as right up there with the rest of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan, thanks for that. Deputy Klassen, Scott, you're up.
Thanks. Kind of further into it, Reeve Hent said, we at Wheeling County here, we have other urban neighbors than what's in this room, and that they support us in different ways. And it works together, but there's also areas in our county that are far out from here that have no big urban neighborhood, but there's big industrial development there because of the location and proximity to, rail, whatever it is. And I don't want to have that taken away from us in our lands that are within the CMRB, because there are certain things that we can offer that the big urban partners cannot offer. And it's mostly has to deal with land size, to be honest. And it's our fear, because those projects have a lot of revenue, tax revenue for us as well, that I would have no problem sharing with somebody if we have sharing the services or whatever. But there's reasons people want to go somewhere, big industrial sites and stuff like that. They want to go where they want to go. And if we turn them away because it doesn't fit the mold, they're going to go further away than this area. And we're going to lose any benefit whatsoever. And that is something that it sits and weighs heavily on my mind, because, it will, we need that income. Everybody needs that income. We're losing our oil and gas revenue all the time, linear assessments, things like that. And we have to come up with that some way. Otherwise, we're going to be struggling in the future. And furthermore, this pandemic that we've seen, there's a shift of people. We've seen more people moving out to our area right now because of lifestyle. We have internet, people are working from home. So I see people moving out here buying acreages that I've never seen before. They're happy to commute, to have that distance away from the urban centers. So that's just maybe a 3, 4, 5 year thing, but it's happening now. And I think we should recognize that. So thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Anyone else want to weigh in here? Unfortunately, we lost Peter Brown. I just got a note from him. His internet went down, and he's unable to. He's trying, but he's unable to rejoin. But we'll. Any other comments, thoughts on this? Craig, Mayor Snodgrass, go ahead.
Thanks, Craig. So to Dan, Scott, and Revol, I've been trying to wrap my head around it. Like, there seems to be a big concern, probably the biggest one in the whole thing. And I guess maybe Suzanne, if she's, I think she's still here with us, but I'll kind of put it to her because I'm trying to figure out like where these businesses would randomly be going that wouldn't have servicing. That's, you know, they all need to be serviced and everything. So I don't understand where they would be going that they wouldn't want the area to be developed and have the proper servicing in place. Like, I'm just struggling to see why this is so limiting. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, we just had another farm dealership jump the highway outside of High River, and that's fine. That was all for it. Like, that's where your business does better, then great, 2 thumbs up. But you know, now that's an equipment dealership. They flush the toilet 28 times a day, and that's about it. So it's not a big water requirement. But I'm struggling to see where this plan puts this massive limitation, and there's absolutely no way you will ever have economic growth in your counties and MDs. You're making blanket statements, and I'm not understanding where you're at. And so Suzanne, like, maybe you can help me because I'm not real familiar with Rocky View or Wheatland areas and where their districts are, but I am here in High River. So maybe Suzanne, you can shed some light for me so I can wrap my head around this as to where you would like to grow that doesn't have what the actual business would be looking at, which is servicing already.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you for the questions, and I'll do my best to do this on the spot. Ultimately, we've heard some of the other Reeves make some great comments about business wanting to locate where it makes sense for them too, and it could be just these corridors of transportation that make sense, and we are limited in the plan. The plan is very explicit that you have to be in a hamlet, a joint planning area, or less than 20 acres, or it has to go to the board. And, you know, what we've been experiencing so far and how this is rolling out is we don't have that confidence that what we propose would be approved. So we face this uncertainty. We also face the extra layers of creating these plans that adds time to the development process. And therefore, it's going to make it uneconomical for businesses to look at that risk that they're going to face. So they face the risk of the extra time, layers, and uncertainty of whether the board would even approve it, even if it was according to the plan, because the plan is not explicit enough and it's also very limiting. So when we look at that, we are coming up with that conclusion, and we feel that that's all of these things combined will make it very, very uncertain and brings us to where we are today with this conversation. So I appreciate that we're having it, and you know, ultimately, we're asking for some leniency because many of our businesses don't require a lot of servicing. Of course, they require utilities, but then people are getting really creative with that as well. And they're also getting creative with not having to have an actual connection to a water line, although some do require it. So we do have a central corridor area, but unless we have that in a joint planning area, we don't have the opportunity for that for any growth. And of course, we do see businesses that do want to locate where it makes sense for them. And as mentioned previously, if they are impacting our urban neighbors, we're getting to the table, and we would continue to do that, offering opportunity to be a part of the entire planning process, as well as if there's a benefit to cost share, making this all viable for everybody in the area. That is definitely our intent. Thank you again for bringing up the question, and we'll be happy to keep that conversation going.
Yeah, let's do exactly that, Craig. If you want to follow up there, go ahead.
Yeah. So back to Suzanne. Thanks for that. I guess I'll ask: has it been working in the past? does the county feel like the way we were doing things before was working very well?
Suzanne, if you want to take that, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mayor Craig. Definitely want to get to the table. I think we have so many things that were limiting us from moving forward as fast as we wanted to. We've done some studies and we want to get to the table. I think there's limitations for our goals to move that, and of course the economics of moving forward in one specific area. And so we just feel like having more open areas to where business wants to locate would be a great benefit again to the region for overall, again, diversifying our tax base as well. But in terms of the other plans that we are, if you're specifically referring to the area in the Afika area, the Highway 2 industrial corridor, we are certainly willing to work on at the table on that. But again, I think all of us have been limited in terms of capacity, and yet we're still happy to move forward with that as it. I mean, there's so many things related to recovery from the 2013, related to capacity and those things, and we've understood and recognized. But we're a willing partner on that, and hope we can continue to work together.
So previously, it was a free for all. Your businesses could open anywhere they want. I'm just struggling with whether that really worked out the way you're saying, because we've already been through that with what you guys are fearful of this plan. Like, you want the free for all, but it didn't really work out before. I'm struggling. I'm sorry, but I'm just struggling, Suzanne, with I don't get where this plan just absolutely harms the counties and the MDs so much. I'm just not, and I'm open to it, but I'm just not getting where the fear is.
Well, thank you again, Craig. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging us to have this discussion. There are so many opportunities that we don't want to close them down if they fit and it goes through criteria. I don't think we have a free-for-all going on. We're always working with our neighbors. But again, if we make it so costly and make it so difficult and so prescribed, business isn't going to go into the county. And so we feel like it's kind of an unfair advantage. It's just say, put it in the towns and put it in the city because it's going to be easier. They have all the approved land uses there and they can do, on their landscape that they've annexed, that they are able to put that wherever it works for them. So for us, we can't. We just feel that, in our opinion, it just unfairly advantages the less bureaucracy and the less challenge that you end up putting it into the urban centers instead. So we do want to continue to work, and we want to make this workable for us. And I would say we could also continue this conversation quite happily. I know we would be pleased to do that with your council and our council as well.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest, there's businesses that I want in town and there's businesses that I'd rather they located in the MD. In the Afika area, it's much more industrial and there's certain things that just fit better out there. So, that's where I see this regional plan, giving us a much better kind of format to discuss where these businesses should go and to be sharing and to be able to share fairly in it, because we had this glorious thing called the FICA going on, but it never really went on. It's on paper, it all looks beautiful and everything, but it never really happened. So I don't see that this plan is going to do it, but we'll continue the conversation. Thanks very much, Greg.
Okay, you bet. That was a good discussion. So we've got Deputy Claassen. You're up next.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, I'll be brief here. So my thing is about servicing and these lots. There's a lot of industrial sites, light industrial, heavy industrial, that do not require servicing. They can do it on the land that they have. It may be cheaper for them to drill a well. That is still a viable option, and have a septic system there that is still allowed by our environment. It's still allowed in the industry. And for them, there's lots of them that'll just do it themselves. I have a big industrial plant down in the Carsland area that has its own water plant and it's been operating for probably 50 years. And they have their own sewer treatment site, and they did do it themselves. And if they know that coming in, that the services aren't going to be there, and they will do it themselves, and they can figure it out. And I have another one on the highway right now that the regional water line runs from Calgary to Strathmore, and we have no access to it at this time. So, there's just, whether it needs it or not, it's up to the land developer if they feel it. So I'll just state that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott. GC, you've made a couple of comments in the chat. Do you want to weigh in, or just let your comments stand?
Well, I mean, yeah. Why don't I just I'm going to just revoice them. The first one is that there was a very big conversation at the start of this pandemic whether the project of densifying urbanism, which is more cost effective, would be derailed by the pandemic. And the data in our region, the data in our city, and the data worldwide is proving otherwise. People are still flooding into connected urban neighborhoods, and those areas are actually doing a lot better than disaggregated places with regard to per capita viral spread and all of those things. So interesting conversation. The data is showing otherwise, and there's a ton of reasons for that. And, human cultures evolved in cities in times of plague, and I'd just like to point that out. The other thing I just want to note is, and to challenge Reeve all a little bit, is that the challenge that this plan that we are developing together is too precise and restrictive, and yet too not precise enough, are sort of mutually exclusive. And then I understand fully that you can strike exactly the wrong note on both of those extremes. But I'm not sure that that's what's happening here. And I just wanted to point out that you were making statements that did come across as mutually exclusive, in case you wanted to clarify that.
Okay, Suzanne, I'll get you an opportunity to respond if you'd like. And if not, we can move on. But if you'd like an opportunity to respond to that, feel free. And if you're trying to speak, you're on mute. And if not, we'll move on to our next one. Suzanne, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I think the perspectives we're hearing beg for a little more clarification, because, we can continue to dispute each other's commentary and data and where these ideas are coming from and so on. I just want to say our interpretation of it and what we see in the plan at this time is of a great impact to us, and we're really concerned. So, I hope that we can identify it by having a further discussion at the tag on this as well, and bring in some other people into the conversation. I also appreciate the time you've given me to explain it, and I would look forward to continuing to dive into it. I know we're looking to get into some other topics as well, but ultimately what we're seeing is important for our community to continue to develop economically, and what is prescribed here, limiting it to those particular growth forms, is what we're saying is the issue. So if I've had comments that you're saying are mutually exclusive, then obviously I need to clarify those, or we can clarify those in a further discussion. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
You bet, Suzanne. Thank you. So we'll I would suggest perhaps have two more speakers on our list on this sort of wide-ranging discussion, and then we'll get back to Lisa's presentation. But I think this is a good conversation. If the next couple of comments spur a response or two, I think that's okay as well. But Dan, we'll go to you, and then to Marshall, and then we'll perhaps get back on the agenda. But I think this is important stuff. So go ahead. Oh, you're muted there, Dan. No.
Sorry about that. Through the chair. So Mayor Snodgrass asked a specific question. He said, where isn't it working? And so I've got several examples. In interest of time, I'll just offer one. We've Rocky View County's got an area we call Fulton Industrial Park in the southeast portion of the county. Not sure if you're familiar with it, Craig. We service it, and it's far from an urban center, and it's a requirement I think that's essential to that portion of the county, because it fills a need. We've got some trucking companies that are established in there. And I mean, as opposed to having a truck park on every second 20-acre parcel in the county, we're trying to steer certain portions of that business there. And I think it's got a real benefit to the county. Craig, it's bigger than 20 acres and it's outside of a JPA. If this plan goes the way it's going, a perfect example of how it wouldn't work is that Fulton Industrial Park would not be allowed. Very plain and simple. It's just things like that are, and just real quick to call it a free-for-all, I think that's unfair. And then you asked Revol if it was working for her. I can't speak to Foothills, but it's working in Rocky View. And I don't think it's a free-for-all, and it's working. But there's an example of how this plan is failing us when it comes to the employment areas. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dan. That helps. I'll look it up. Appreciate it.
That's great. All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Thank you, Craig. Mayor Chalmers, Marshall, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I hit RTS and I was wanting to type in just the recent comment from the minister. But I just encourage all of us to continue to think regional and make it work for everyone here. So I was actually just looking to type in a comment from the minister on his letter dated the 15th.
Emphasizing the importance of economic recovery and development.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay, good. Thanks very much for that. Lisa, I think we're back with you, and thanks again to everyone for, I think it was a good, frank, honest, and respectful conversation. So thank you very much to everyone for your participation. Lisa, thank you for your indulgence in taking us a little off track there, but I think it's important stuff. So we'll turn back to you. We will go on to number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very related kind of discussion, and one thing we've heard from some of the stakeholders that we've been talking to through TAG, through committee, through public engagement, is about the opportunities to bring forward exceptions, different kinds of exceptions. And of course, the idea of exceptions and when they might be appropriate and how the board will see these exceptions. There's a lot of fear that, the board will not consider and approve growth outside of what's prescribed in the plan, and that, there's a lot of questions around how exceptions might be brought forward, how the board will review them, and then the appetite of the board to approve those exceptions as they come forward. So some of the background and context to this item. We have received a request. It's something that did come up on all the open houses that we had, and we've received a lot of feedback around this specific area. There are others that we have heard from developers that they would like to build something, but they don't have access to services right now, and they're hoping that some clarity around growth areas will help them get access to services. We've heard from developers that are outside of those growth areas that are really hoping to build something that would qualify as an employment area. And in this case, Rocky View County has brought forward a proposed expansion to the Hamlet growth area in the county, the Harmony Hamlet growth area. And there is, and we've heard it as well at CMRB administration through the open houses, there is a significant growth pressure along the Highway 1 corridor for tourism, for highway business, and development around the Harmony airport, or the Springbank airport, excuse me, and, building on the Harmony development. Jamie, if you could just run to the map, please. This area, obviously, it's Harmony itself is quite a large conceptual scheme, or hamlet that's being proposed, and then you've got the Springbank Airport there. So this, I think, speaks to some of the questions that folks have about how the board will look at these kinds of proposals as they're brought forward, and the process that they might use to have them reviewed. So while we feel in general that the scope of this is quite large, it's a pretty large hamlet area. that's being proposed, but it does capture a lot of the qualities of a Hamlet growth area with a major employment area inside of it that are spoken to in the plan. We don't have specific proof of development need. In other words, we haven't seen a market feasibility assessment or anything like that. So I can only speak to the anecdotal information that we've received from developers who are interested in having their properties move forward in this area. But that's one thing that we've trying to be thoughtful about is if a developer wants to build it, is that really a market need? Is there really a drive to actually build out those properties, or is there a drive to see improvement on the land values there? We're always trying to tease out those discussions because although quite often there's a market need when a developer is interested in a plan, in my experience and in the experience of others that I've heard from on the other side of this argument who don't wish to see big expansions outside of preferred growth areas, which also are rural residents. There are two sides to the rural perspective. I just want to acknowledge that. Just because a developer says it's true doesn't mean it's true. And we have a lot of anecdotal information from the development industry that there's a lot of pressure here. But we look forward to the thoughts from the committee on how might an expansion of a Hamlet area be reviewed by the board. What kinds of information would the board like to see in order to determine, is this a true market need, or is it development pressure that maybe isn't as supported by a market need? And how will this exceptions to the policy, how does the committee feel this exceptions to the policy might be handled? How would it like it to be handled? So I think this is an important test of the policies and how they might unfold, and especially around employment, which obviously is a very passionate subject for all of the committee members. So we really look forward to that feedback so that we can help ensure that the policy will support the board in understanding what it wants to understand in terms of making these decisions, and that the process is clearly provided to them so we understand how does it go from a development pressure to a potential exception to the plan going forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that's a very important question in terms of any potential exceptions to the plan, and I think you've asked a good question here. Councillor Carra is on the list. GC, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to just first off say I think that was a really great introductory statement by Lisa in terms of sort of laying out, the pressures and the desires of a variety of different constituencies. And I guess my response, and this is not an official City of Calgary response, my response is obviously the Springbank Airport being like the number 5 busiest airport or something in Canada. It is a major employment center, and it's a major asset in the region, and we should make sure that the growth that occurs around it complements that and is complementary to the region. And so, I don't think it would be insane to take a position that we want to constrict or restrict growth around the airport. But what we have in a regional plan is the opportunity to hold a development industry that can do excellent work and can do some pretty shoddy and mediocre work to a better standard of outcome. And I guess my question to everybody is, are we here to be cheerleaders of growth? Are we here to be cheerleaders of good growth? One of the tenets that we've brought to our approach to city building in Calgary over the last 10 years is we want to make it easier to build good stuff. And sometimes that sometimes that doesn't fit comfortably into the regulatory environment that we've inherited from the past. Sometimes it's easy to build bad stuff and very hard to build good stuff. And we're trying to change that. And I would suggest that collectively as a region, that should be our goal as well, to make it easy to build good stuff and harder and harder to build bad stuff. And that we should all be legion in that, because our job is to be, a regulator towards best possible outcomes for all constituencies, as opposed to a cheerleader for a development industry writ large that is a huge mixed bag.
GC, thank you very much. Anyone else care to weigh in on this? All right, Dan, go ahead.
Thanks, through the chair, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. So yeah, this is a perfect example of what we've been talking about, and I see people recognize that what's proposed here is around the airport, but we've also got the Trans-Canada Highway, the #1 highway in Canada, that there's definitely pressure from the development community to put employment areas along the Trans-Canada as well, which makes sense. I think every major part of the highway within across Canada has employment corridors and business corridors. So I guess I'd just like to get a bit of a sense from Councillor Carra when you say good development as opposed to development. I mean, that's, I guess, fairly subjective. I'm not quite sure how to take that. We've got standards. I think they're similar to Calgary's. It depends on who you talk to. That again, I not quite understand what you mean by shoddy or bad development. In my experience with Rocky View County, the development is you just don't allow it to happen willy-nilly. There's obviously some planning involved, and it needs to make sense. So if I could just maybe get a response to that, would be great. And if there's anybody else, but I've got a whole list of things to say about this, what we have on our map here, but in the interest of time, I'll wait for a question if it's presented.
Sure, fair enough. GC, do you want to respond there?
I mean, honestly, we don't know the difference. We don't acknowledge that some developers do better work than other developers, and that it's all, perfectly the same and perfectly balanced due to the regulatory environment we have. I mean, obviously, we just undertook a pretty deep analytical dive into how different kinds of growth will significantly improve or, not improve outcomes in terms of all kinds of metrics. So obviously, I have a hard time understanding someone who's been in the game for as long as Reeve Hen and has seen growth in the region occur, that we can't differentiate between better outcomes and worse outcomes. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be very thoughtful about where development goes, and we're trying to be very thoughtful about how the development that does go is better than a baseline or a business as usual scenario. We're trying to improve the basic outcome, and that's going to be the single biggest thing we can do to, over the long term, improve the competitiveness of our region globally. So I honestly don't understand the question. If there, and I will also note that I think that to say that development along a highway is the way everybody does it, yeah, that's the way everyone does it, and a lot of people regret being so laissez-faire about things like that. Like, I remember in the mid 2000s helping to run a workshop on transfer of development credits or transfer of development rights, and we brought people up from Boulder, Colorado, and Denver, Colorado, where they have functioning TDR systems in place. And those guys drove from the Calgary International Airport to where we were having the event in Red Deer. And when they stepped out of the car and I met them in the parking lot, there was tears in their eyes. And I asked them, "Are you guys okay?" And they were like, "We just drove our part of the world 20 years ago, and you guys haven't made the same mistakes that we have. And you guys don't understand what you have here." And it's the whole pave over paradise and put up a parking lot argument. We want growth to occur, but we don't want willy-nilly growth to occur. We don't want to overbuild things like they have in corridors throughout the states. We want to be thoughtful about it. And so, please, if our opening proposition that all and any development is fine and good and perfectly regulated by the current system that we have, I can understand why you don't want to be sitting around this table, but that's simply not the facts, and we can and should and must do better for ourselves and for future generations.
Dan, you want to respond, and then we'll go to Suzanne.
Sure, real quick. Yeah, so it works when you want to do it on the Trans-Canadian Highway, but it doesn't work out in a rural municipality. Is that what I'm hearing? And again, I don't know why you're failing to see what the question is. I guess maybe I'm lucky. I work with administration, and I don't see any bad development in Rocky View. Thanks.
Okay, we'll leave that there. Suzanne, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Awesome discussion going on here. Just want to throw in a few more points here. Consultant, after evaluating the area, did state we're not a region in crisis. We're not doing a willy-nilly out in Foothills County. We have our own growth management strategy, which we're trying to do things to the best of our ability. We are subject to the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan and all of our intermunicipal collaborations, which we take very seriously, and we continue to meet, and we'll put out and have put out many invitations to meet in regards to the other developments that are going on, including industrial corridor. So what I'm also not seeing is metrics that have been referred to. Anytime those can be shared, we'd be happy to review those as well. And we would note, as we have in the past, that the information used for the county was inaccurate. So we do have a question in regards to how that is rolling out, and look forward to more information on that. Next, I'd just like to mention that in this plan, the rurals have to prove everything, and the urbans do not. So we question, why do we need a market feasibility assessment when the urbans don't need one? So since we have to provide everything and prove everything, we feel that this is an expense to us, a complication, an uncertainty, a challenge as to what we're going to provide on a rural landscape. Again, qualifying it that we don't intend to do bad development, but actually coordinated, planned, thoughtfully with our planning department and with our council, who consider at every turn the interest of our neighboring residents through a full public process and in consultation with the developers, not in subject to them. So very importantly, and our county has studied transfer of development credits significantly. We've also found that a really great answer to development that is not working is the word no. And we use that frequently in our rural landscapes, including even more than first parcel out. So there are so many examples that we can share with you about how we are working hard in our area to accommodate that. And we just feel that this plan needs further consideration. So where we are planning to do things to the best of our ability, we'll have those opportunities, and it doesn't limit us significantly, in contrast to what we perceive and see in the writing of the plan, is in contrast to what we see happening with the urban neighbors. So thank you again for the chance to comment on all this.
Sure. Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate that. All right. In our last 7 minutes together, Lisa, we'll turn it back to you. We'll talk about local employment areas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of local employment areas, so the plan as it's laid out right now has employment areas which are very urban in nature and serviced and have services. And then we have local employment areas, which are intended to be smaller areas where there are potentially multi-lot developments, but they're locally, they're tied to the local market. And they're tied to the needs of the local industries. And there could be areas that maybe don't need to be in a preferred growth area because they don't require a high level of services. In the way the plan is currently set up, we are looking at local employment areas as 20 acres. They can't be located within there's no exact requirement. It just says recommended distance of 2 kilometers from an urban municipality or I think preferred growth area. And also there's no requirement, for them to have utility servicing. we've gotten a lot of feedback that the 20 acres is too small. And I think we talked about this at the last committee. We really don't want to be catching home-based businesses in the rural area that might be on a 40-acre lot, for example, but be only one business. And also, we don't want to be catching things in the urban area that might have a substantial number of employees in one area or be substantial in size. So we are proposing to remove the requirement for stat plans for these areas, and then we're going to be discussing that with TAG tomorrow. But also, we're going to be discussing what might be a better metric to use for defining local employment areas, because I think right now the general consensus seems to be, while we would like to direct jobs to areas that are better planned or well planned, there is a need for local development in areas that don't have a preferred growth area nearby or that are rural in nature. And so the plan needs to have some more flexibility around that. We don't want to be catching too many applications, and we don't want to be stepping from the regional perspective into the municipal perspective. So I think, I believe we have direction from the last committee to investigate a different approach to this. And I think I hear that there's also a need to look at how the local employment areas and the employment areas relate to each other and the lines between them. So I would propose that we understand that this number is too small. I think we heard that very clearly from committee last time and at TAG, and we are definitely working to find something more appropriate. But I think we also need to add on a discussion about the difference between employment areas and local employment areas and location and criteria, and just have that discussion so that we can better support the committee in terms of a path forward between the various diverse perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Lisa. And we are a little short on time, but with that summary, anyone wish to offer a perspective or ask a question? Revol, Suzanne, go ahead.
A very big thank you, and I look forward to you sending that to TAG. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add in response to what we have before us here on local employment areas? Okay. Lisa, thank you very much. We really appreciate your diligence in putting this together and stepping us through all of these. We look forward to seeing the results of the TAG work over the next couple of weeks at an upcoming board meeting. So thank you very much for that. My friends, we are done our agenda here. Our next meeting of the Land Use and Servicing Committee is June 3rd, scheduled for the 3rd of June, 9 a.m. We have a series of board meetings, though, coming up. One also a governance committee meeting on the 13th of May. So the next that many of us would be together on would be a week tomorrow, Friday the 23rd of April. And with our agenda being exhausted, I will return 2 minutes to your collective calendars to do with what you will. Thank you very much, everyone, for your thoughtful participation today. Apologies, Shelley, thank you so much. We forgot the motion. I got so excited that we were beginning to get done here. We do need a motion. Thank you, Shelley, to receive for information. That the committee provide feedback and receive for information the growth plan areas for further consideration.
So move.
Reeve Henn makes that motion. Do we have a second? Deputy Reeve Class. All right. Any discussion? All right. By exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion? Seeing none, hearing none, we still have the opportunity to finish 1 minute early. Thank you all for your work today. Good job, everyone. Be well.
Well done. Thanks, Greg.